This is the Babcock, named for W.J. and Charles Babcock of Rochester, New York. Charles was fish commissioner in New York in the latter part of the 19th century. Start the thread behind the eye. Take it all the way back to the bend. Trim the tag. After I cut it, I always take a wrap or two, because there's always a little bit of a tag left. So I'll cover that. Tie in fine gold tinsel on the far side of the hook. That way when you wind it, it'll start from the bottom. We're going to take 5 turns back. In order to get adjacent turns, if you're using metal tinsel, you can let it slide off the turn, slide off the last turn before the turn you're making now. And you'll feel a little click. At my age, it's a little bit tough to see these turns, to see the wraps clearly. And doing it by feel really helps me. That won't work with Mylar tinsel. You're on your own there. As I bind down the tinsel butts, I like to go all the way up to the front of the fly, just shy of where we started the thread. As we do this fly, we're going to try to build a taper that's thicker in the middle and narrower at the ends. And I will speed up some of the tedious winding sections here. The rest of it will be normal speed. Okay, these are tails that I've made up ahead of time. The near tails were made up of slips of duck quill, black on top, yellow on the bottom. The near ones were made from the rights, and the far ones were made from the lefts. And if that doesn't make sense to you, you need to watch my introduction to Married Wings, which I'll link down below. Cut the butts off at an angle. Again, trying to promote a taper that's wider in the middle. And again, take it all the way to the front. I didn't get these cut very cleanly. As you can see, there's a little bit of a cliff there. And I'm just going to fill it in with wraps of thread. And I've sped up this sequence because it can get boring watching somebody wrap thread. I'm bored to tears right now. You don't have to do this on wet flies, especially if you're tying them to fish. But if you're tying display flies, it's a good habit to get into. It really pays off with full dress salmon flies later as you get into more complex flies. Now I've tied in the ribbing here, again on the far side of the hook. And that way when the ribbing is wound, it will appear to come right out of the bottom. It'll appear to come from nowhere. It's a very nice effect. When I flatten the thread, I'm twisting the bobbin counterclockwise until the thread is flat. If you go too far with it, the thread will start to twist up again. And you have to do this every so often because as you wrap thread, it twists up. Now, up at the front of the fly, I'm tying in the red floss. This is a single strand of Danville's 4-strand floss that I'm going to wind back and then forward again over itself. Be sure to take your time when winding floss. Just do it as carefully as you can. You could, if you wish, tie this in at the rear to start with, and maybe might be a good idea to tie 2 strands and then wrap them both at the same time up to the front only. I've done a lot of flies that way. Each way has its advantages. Uh-oh. Slid down the slope there. Need to backtrack. As you're going down a slope, sometimes the floss will separate on you. That just happened to me there. And just backtrack. Here I'm trying to power through it, which works sometimes. And sometimes it doesn't. I'm going to have to backtrack again. Always stay in control, keeping tension on the floss while letting it slide through your fingers so that the errant fibers don't break. And now, what I'll do here is I'm twisting just a little bit, twisting the floss just slightly. In this case, clockwise. It may vary. Just twist it up a little bit. Not enough to put a twist. You still want it flat when you wind it, but just enough to keep it together as it goes down that slope. I trapped the floss a couple times there. It's a little more secure than just tying it down. And I'm going to try to do 5 evenly spaced wraps of flat tinsel for the rib on this. And don't be afraid to redo this. Try to get them evenly spaced as best you can. Again, as you go down slopes, it can become problematic. Just keep tension on the tinsel. Don't take no for an answer. You'll get it. I like to tie off on the side, ideally. Bottom's fine, too. It's all about control, trying to keep everything under control. And keeping everything under tension very much helps your control. Tying in a hackle now by the tip. I've prepped this hackle already, and I know that the strands of it will, after it's wrapped, will reach to the point of the hook. From the tie-in point to the point of the hook, I've kind of pre-measured it, just holding it up there. It doesn't have to be exact. It can be a little long, a little short. It's not the end of the world. But that's kind of what you're shooting for, is down to the point of the hook after it's wrapped. I like to fold the hackle as I wrap. It's much easier than doing it ahead of time, in my opinion. Now, I made a mistake here. I should have already switched to black thread, and I didn't. I failed to do that. That way, if I get any gaps in my hackle wrapping, the white won't show through. Fortunately, in this case, there's enough hackle, and I've got it spaced close enough together. It doesn't matter. But I should have already switched. At the end of the last stage, I should have changed out to black thread. So do as I say, not as I do. You've always got to be thinking a stage ahead, and apparently I wasn't thinking at all. I always like to beat myself up psychologically after a screw up like that. It makes me a better person. Hold the thread under tension and pluck out strays with tweezers. By far the best way to do it. Don't cut them with scissors. You'll wind up with all these little stubs. Now I'll switch to black thread. Hold the thread tags under tension and get in there close with your scissors and cut them off. Try to split the hackle and bring it down on both sides of the hook. Take a couple turns back around it. We want to keep it out of the way when we mount the wing. It helps a lot. Just one strand of hackle sticking up in the middle of the fly can affect your wing set. It's surprising. If you like level wings as I do, keep your left elbow down as you mount them. These are a pair of married wings I've made up ahead of time. Again, near wing made from rights, the far wing made from duck quills. You can use either duck quills or goose quills for this fly. Right there, I got both sides, both wings tied in on my side of the hook. This happens to me quite a bit. You've got to be vigilant and make sure that far wing is slightly straddling the other side, the far side of the hook. This is better here. I've got just a couple wraps on now, and I'll get it adjusted. I see what needs to happen. I'm twisting up the thread to make it strong because I'm going to put some very firm wraps up the head here in a minute. Cut the butts off. And I didn't quite get them there. I'm going to have to do some tidying up here. You have to have great scissors for this kind of work. it might be the most important tool for doing these fancy flies. I like Dr. Slick razor scissors for these, but your mileage may vary on that. Just keep wrapping as you go up. Always pinching with the left hand to keep the wings, to make the wings stay put. I'll do another whip finish to get some coverage up front there, which is always an issue. After I finish this whip finish and cut the thread, I still had a little bit of yellow that I didn't see at first. You can see it here, but remember, we're under magnification. So I wound thread up the head again and did one more whip finish that took care of the issue. Before gluing it up, make any last-minute adjustments on the wing before you cut the thread. And here's the final Babcock. Didn't turn out too badly. These are fun flies to tie. And I don't know, there's something I find very exciting about doing these.